On the night of April 28, 1970, in Talmadge, Ohio, Karen Louise Bentz, an 18-year-old blonde, left her parents' house at around 11:15 p.m. Her apartment was only 4 blocks away and she decided to walk the distance, but she would never make it home. The next morning around 7:30 a.m. on April 29, 1970, Karen was found brutally murdered. 5 years later, another tragedy struck Talmadge. This time, it was the 21-year-old Loretta Jean Davis. Loretta had returned home from a date just past midnight on September 27, 1975. Later, she left a note for her parents, telling them that she was going out to grab a bite. Loretta never returned home, and her body was discovered by a motorist on September 28, 1975. What really happened with Karen and Loretta? Was this the work of a single person, or were there multiple killers loose on the streets of Talmadge? The mystery has finally been solved after a wait of 50 years. Today, we will be looking at the cases of Karen Bentz and Loretta Davis, who finally got justice 5 decades after their brutal assault and murder. But first, if you haven't subscribed to our channel, please hit the subscribe and like buttons. Now, without any further ado, let's dive into the mystery. Talmadge is a city in eastern Summit County, Ohio, United States. It has a small district in Portage County and is a suburb of Akron. Although the city has beautiful scenic geography, it is not considered to be a very safe city. It is safer than only 26% of the U.S. cities, and the chances of being a victim of a violent crime in Talmadge are 1 to 872. And it was here where 2 such violent crimes took place in the 1970s, to which Karen and Loretta fell victim. Karen Louise Bentz, born August 1, 1951, was the daughter of Mr. and Mrs. Leland Bentz. Her loved ones used to call her Siren, an affectionate nickname. Karen had a sister named Sandra and a brother named Jerry Lee, who was the youngest sibling. Both Sandra and Jerry had a close bond with Karen and looked up to her. Karen's best friend, Patricia Statler, used to stay right behind Karen's parents' house on Arlington Street. Karen and Patricia went to Central High School together. However, Karen never graduated and had to drop out in 1967 as she had gotten pregnant. That same year, Karen gave birth to a girl and named her Lori. Karen was also married to a man named Dave Groves for a short time. Karen was an attractive 18-year-old, 5'4" blonde back in 1970. She stayed in Talmadge, sharing an apartment with a secretary in 56 North Arlington Street, where she had moved in March 1970. Karen was working 2 jobs to show her parents that she could make it on her own too, while Lori was staying with Mr. and Mrs. Leland Bentz. Karen used to work 7 hours at Lawson's on South Main Street near Wilbeth Avenue and 4 hours at the Red Barn across from the City Hospital on East Market. At the time, Karen had a 20-year-old boyfriend named Bill Schad, who was a student at Akron University. Sandra described her sister Karen as a beautiful and kind person who was also a caring mother and sister. Karen had a normal day on April 28, 1970. She first worked her shift at the Red Barn and then at Lawson's. After completing her shift at the Lawson's, Karen went to her parents' place at 56 Jewett Street around 10 p.m. She had come home to pick up her plain white uniform, a girdle, stockings, and penny loafers. Karen used to work for long hours at a stretch and usually didn't have enough time to do her laundry, so her mother used to wash and iron her clothes and uniforms for her. After collecting her things around 11:15 p.m., Karen left for her apartment at 56 North Arlington Street, but she never arrived there. The following day, on April 29, 1970, around 7:30 a.m., Karen's body was spotted by a motorist named Coleman Pinkston just off the Indian Hills Road, 6 miles from her apartment. Pinkston was driving through the exclusive Talmadge Woods when he found her. He drove up to Ben Ware's house, who stayed nearby, and telephoned the authorities. The police found Karen's body face down, fully clothed along the Indian Hills Road. She had been stabbed 12 times in the chest with a knife and also been strangled. Some of the stab wounds had gone so deep that they pierced her lungs and heart. The strangulation had left hemorrhaging throughout her face, mostly around her eyes. The police didn't find any semen or any injuries consistent with a sexual assault, although it did appear like there had been an attempt of sexual assault on Karen, and the killer might have struck her with a knife when she retaliated. The killer's DNA was found under Karen's fingernails, which indicated signs of struggle. She was wearing a light-colored jumpsuit, a yellow spring jacket, and sandals. Captain Jerry Knapp noticed a set of tire tracks near the body and determined that Karen had been dropped off from a vehicle after being stabbed. There wasn't a purse or any identification papers on Karen. Sergeant David Williams traced her identity through initials on a Central High class of 1969 ring found on her finger. On East Avenue, which was less than a mile away from where Karen's body was found, the police discovered the girdle, worn penny loafers, stockings, and one of the dresses Karen was carrying. There were no bloodstains on any of the items found. The police assumed that the killer might have thrown these items out of their car when fleeing the crime scene. The other white dress that Karen was carrying was found at the Southeast Avenue exit of the East Expressway, which was nearly 2 miles away from where the body was found. The Talmadge Police Department joined hands with the Akron Police Department to work together on this case and try to put the culprit behind bars. They started by collecting information about Karen from her family members and then went on to question Karen's co-workers and neighbors. Sadly, nothing important came out of it. Ray West, Karen's manager at the Red Barn, said Karen was great at her job. The regular customers knew her and she made friends easily. Bill Schad, Karen's boyfriend, told the police that Karen had asked him to call her a little after 11 p.m., and when he did, she hadn't arrived at her apartment. Her roommate answered the phone, and Bill dropped her a number for Karen to call on. She had never called back. On May 1st, 1970, Karen's funeral took place at Eckerd Baldwin Funeral Home, followed by her burial at Oakwood Cemetery in Cuyahoga Falls. The police kept looking for any clues or answers for years, but came up with nothing. In an article titled "Getting Away with Murder," published in the Sunday, May 25, 1975 issue of the Akron Beacon Journal, the writer stated that it was very unlikely that the Karen Bentz murder would ever be solved. And just like that, Karen's case went cold, and it seemed like it was forgotten. But Karen wasn't the only one with an ill fate. Loretta Jean Davis, daughter of Robert and Martha Davis, was a talented 21-year-old woman in 1975. Her loved ones used to call her Jeannie. She was nearly 6 feet tall and had soft, mint green colored eyes. Loretta had light brown colored hair, which she kept in a long shag style. Loretta stayed with her parents at 286 Old Forge Road in Brimfield. Martha, Loretta's mother, had a work-from-home data processing job, and Loretta would often work with her to help out. Loretta had dreams of studying business at Kent State University. Her friends thought of her as an easygoing but impulsive girl who would often do things in the spur of the moment. She wasn't a very outgoing person and mostly kept to herself. Loretta was quite athletic and used to love baton twirling, for which she even won a few trophies. Loretta had a nice stereo in her room, and she liked to dance and listen to blues and rock and roll. Loretta was very quiet and reserved around strangers, but her personality flipped around the one she was comfortable with. Around her friends, she was quite outspoken and brutally honest. If she disagreed with someone, she would speak right up, but if things escalated to an argument, she would walk away. As the clock approached midnight on Saturday, September 27, 1975, Loretta had returned home to 286 Old Forge Road in Brimfield Township from a date. She had gone to watch a drive-in movie and then for dinner. Sometime after returning home, in the early hours of September 28, 1975, around 12:15 a.m., Loretta's parents heard her leave the house again. They found a note left behind by Loretta saying that she was going out to get something to eat and would be home soon, but her note didn't say where she was going. She never came back home. Around noon, on Sunday, September 28, 1975, Loretta's body was found to the side of the Congress Lake Road, nearly 1.5 miles from Waterloo Road in Suffield Township. When the police found Loretta's body, they immediately suspected foul play. Loretta's jeans had been slid down till below her hips, and the top half of her body was naked with her shirt over her head. County Coroner Robert Seibert claimed that Loretta had been dead for 8 to 12 hours at the time her body was found. She had been sexually assaulted and stabbed twice, one on each side of her chest. The county coroner initially thought that one of the stabs went through her heart and left lung, which allowed the blood to flow into it and ultimately caused her death. When Loretta's autopsy report arrived, the cause of death was ruled as a stab to the heart. A small black-colored plastic piece, which was believed to have been a part of a knife handle, was found stuck in her blouse. There were also red fibers tangled into the soles of her shoes. Victor Biasella, an investigator, noticed grooves in the dirt near Loretta's body, which suggested that she had been dragged to the location where her body was found. The investigators were sure that Loretta had been killed in a different location and then brought to Congress Lake Road. The police started the investigation by interviewing Loretta's close ones. One of Loretta's close friends, who didn't want to disclose her identity, told the police that Loretta might have gone to her favorite bar, Filthy McNasty, at 200 South DePeyster Street. But they start closing at 12:30 a.m., so she couldn't possibly have made it there in time. The other place she thought Loretta could have gone to was Borden Burger in Kent at 1550 South Water Street. That is where she would always go. But all this information from Loretta's friend led the police nowhere. Even after searching through multiple places throughout the city, the police didn't find anything. A few days later, a tip came in, telling the investigators that Loretta was seen in the early hours of the morning on September 28, 1975, around 2 a.m. She was seen with an unidentified man at Talmadge Auto Parts on Southeast Avenue in Talmadge before she was killed. When the detectives arrived there, they found an unlocked Plymouth Duster, Loretta's car, with her purse and personal items resting on the passenger seat. For months, there were no new leads or suspects in Loretta's case, but in 1965, the police questioned Gustav Safaras, a local man who had been in and out of prison for multiple sexual assault charges. Upon being interrogated, he denied even knowing the victim, Loretta Davis. Slowly, the progress in Loretta's case started to decay, and her case went cold too. Loretta Jean Davis was buried in Restland Cemetery, Portage County, Ohio. Karen and Loretta's cases had been cold for a long time, but in 2013, the police department found a piece of key evidence and determined that both the cases were connected. Detective Williams said that he couldn't specifically discuss the evidence, but credited the new technology, a fresh set of eyes, and great detective work. Although the police department didn't say much about this piece of evidence, Captain Doug Bohan went on to disclose that they had found DNA of the killer under Karen's fingernails. Due to the technological limitations back in the 1970s, they couldn't examine this to get the information they needed to hunt the killer down. But now, with the advancement in science, they were able to send this evidence for examination, and it was used to extract the killer's DNA sample. It was now a waiting game. The Talmadge Police Department was eagerly awaiting the results of the test of the new evidence. Meanwhile, they left no other stone unturned and went through the case files twice to see if there was anything else that they had missed out on. But years went by and nothing important came up. After a long wait, in 2019, a DNA sample of the killer was developed. When the police ran the DNA sample through their databases, they found a match which led them back to Gustav Safaras, the man who had been in and out of prison multiple times for sexually assaulting a number of women. On digging a little deeper, the police found more information on Safaras's criminal history, and that he had already been questioned back in 1976 regarding Loretta's murder. Going through Safaras's long history of crime, the police were sure that this man was most likely the killer. They believed that even though he had escaped jail time previously, they had enough evidence to put him behind bars for good this time. Captain Doug Bohan, who had worked in Talmadge Police Department since 2000, retired in 2022 after serving about 22 years. Even after his retirement, He stayed committed to Karen and Loretta's case, hoping that he would finally solve it one day, and that time had finally come. With a team of highly skilled officers like Dave Chichola, Captain Doug Bohan was now determined to send Safaras behind bars. Gustav Alexander Safaras was born on July 23, 1944 in Akron, Ohio, United States. He grew up in Goodyear Heights with his parents and a younger sister. His parents owned the Safaras' restaurant. It was a popular and busy 24-hour steak and eggs place. Safaras went to East High School and then later joined Akron University. However, he dropped out from the university and had to join the Army as the Vietnam War had escalated. In 1965, Safaras was a private first class with the 82nd Airborne Division at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. When he returned, he had a tattoo on one of his arms bearing "Death Before Dishonor." Upon his return, Gustav struggled with multiple jobs and didn't stick to any one for long. In 1972, Gustav got married and moved to Huntington, West Virginia. But even his married life was short-lived, as his wife filed for a divorce in 1974 and separated from him. They never had any children. Safaras landed a job as an auto salesman in 1975. Gustav's acts of crime spanned from 1970 to 1991. Safaras was no stranger to the world of crime, and the list of his vicious acts kept going. In March 1970, Safaras was given 2 years probation for sexually assaulting a woman he was on a date with. He pleaded guilty to lesser charges as part of a plea agreement. In December 1972, Safaras was accused of the sexual assault and kidnap of a 22-year-old woman, but the jury declared a mistrial. In January 1973, a 20-year-old woman accused Safaras of giving her a ride and forcing her to perform oral sex on him. The grand jury returned a no bill. In May 1975, an Akron woman accused Safaras of threatening her with a knife and sexually assaulting her right outside her home, to which Safaras claimed that they had consensual sex. In June 1975, another Akron woman accepted a ride from Safaras. She was choked until she went unconscious and then was sexually assaulted. Safaras pleaded guilty to the assault. It wasn't until 1977 that Safaras was sentenced to 15 to 60 years in prison for the sexual assault of a 28-year-old woman in Cuyahoga Falls. Before sentencing, prosecutors said a psychiatric exam showed that Safaras was neither mentally deficient nor psychotic, but concluded that Safaras was seriously psychologically disturbed. Safaras got parole in November 1990, but violated his parole by victimizing another woman and went on to serve more time in prison until September 2000. During the short period of time when he was out on parole, he was also accused of killing Bonita Virginia Parker in 1991. Even though his DNA was found on Miss Parker, the defendants argued that she was a prostitute and Safaras had been with her, but it didn't prove that he killed her. Gustav Alexander Safaras was arrested from his Jackson Township home in Talmadge on September 6, 2019, for the murder of Karen Louise Bentz in 1970 and Loretta Jean Davis in 1975. On March 16, 2023, Gustav was found guilty of aggravated murder, first-degree murder involving an abduction, second-degree murder, and maiming or disfiguring another. On April 5, 2023, Judge Allison Breaux sentenced Safaras to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
Mr. Safaras, on count 1, murder in the first degree, I'm sentencing you to a period of incarceration of 15 to life. I'm sentencing you to life without the possibility of parole for the murder of Loretta Jean Davis. Count 1 is with regard to the murder of Karen Bentz,
and he is currently being held as an inmate in Summit County Jail. Even though Gustav Safaras was arrested and indicted in 2019, he was charged according to the laws that would have been in play at the time the crimes were committed. Sandra Utterbach, Karen Bentz's sister, who is now 71 years old, was present virtually at the sentencing. She was relieved to see her sister's killer finally face consequences for his actions. Sandra also got emotional during the sentencing, thinking of her sister, and had some words to say to Safras. Sandra Utterback, Karen's sister, gave everyone the insights of what actually happened in her family after Karen's untimely departure. The brutality in Karen's case drove her family members to an unstable mental state. She remembered that her father had a nervous breakdown and nailed all the windows shut in their house, fearing for Jerry Lee, Karen's brother, and Sandra's safety. He wouldn't let any of his kids out of his sight anymore. Their mother turned into an alcoholic just to numb herself from her feelings, which eventually pushed her into depression. Sandra stated that at a very young age she had to give up on her childhood and start taking care of Jerry and Lori, Karen's daughter. She was forced to become the head of the family when she herself was devastated. She knew that nothing could bring Karen and the lost joys of their family back, but she finally felt peace and got closure when Safras was arrested. Karen's husband, Dave Groves, also shared some thoughts on Safras's arrest. Even though he was married to Karen for a short time, he was still happy that her killer had now been caught and will pay for his heinous crimes. Patricia Fletcher, formerly Patricia Statler, was Karen's close friend. When she heard the news of Karen's killer being arrested, she jumped up in joy and screamed "Hallelujah!" She was surprised that it was Gustav Safras, a man she never knew. She had always thought that Karen was killed by someone they both knew. She remembered hearing about Karen's murder from Mr. and Mrs. Leland Bentz. She was scared and moved away in the next few days. She feared that the killer might know her too, and she might be next. Patricia later moved back to Akron and hoped that Karen's killer would be caught someday. She still has an old photograph of her and Karen that helps her to keep their memories together alive. The Talmadge Police Department stated that Safras's capture was one of the proudest moments in TPD history and most likely the greatest individual achievement. Retired Captain Doug Bohan believed that the sentence Safras got was appropriate and long overdue. Safras had walked free for a very long time, and it was about time they arrested him. He hoped that all the police departments take a good look at all the cold cases they have, because they might find an important clue that was not noticed before. Karen Bentz and Loretta Davis's murders left their loved ones in shock for 50 years. Thankfully, with the help of detectives like Doug Bohan, who never gave up looking for Karen and Loretta's killer, the case was finally cracked. This kind of dedication and hard work from the police department will hopefully become the key to cracking many of the other cold cases in the future. Do you think Gustav got away with any more assaults or murders that went unnoticed? Do you think Gustav has any remorse for the crimes he committed? Let us know your thoughts in